Hello, everyone. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this week's Ask the Trainer. And I'm joined by Elly, by Ian, and by Noseman. And today is, the follow-up of, well, last month's Demystifying Post Production. So, guys, what did you show last month? And what type of questions would you love people to ask?
Oh, well, that's a great question. Well, last week we shared, last month we were going over, we were lucky enough to have Wes and Nick from the Adobe Substance team come on in and actually join us and show us some really good workflows, tips, and tricks with Substance Painter and ZBrush connectivity. And then we also expanded on some of those ideas with rendering with Redshift in Cinema 4D. So what was really cool about that was, we were able to go more in depth, but then we thought, let's actually do kind of more of a follow along where we can do a project that's simple enough for people to kind of, learn a few things, but also too not so complex that they're sitting there pulling their hair out, or you're going to look like me. That's not cool. So they're going to just like follow along, go from ZBrush to Substance, and then from Substance, Elly's going to take it, and then Elly's going to come in and do some wizardry magic that she does so well.
That sounds super exciting.
Yes, I can't wait.
I would say before we start, I would take care of the housekeeping here because we have a few exciting links to share. So let me quickly share the screen. There we go. And I'm on the Maxon events page here. I know I showed you that several times, but in case you're new, you maybe don't know all of these beautiful websites. So I'm on the Maxon events page here, Maxon side, news, events. This is where you can find all the cool live streams that we're doing and also live shows that we are hosting or that we are participating in. And today, Ask the Trainer. Tomorrow, VFX and Chill. Next Monday, we're going to have another Demystifying Post-Production live stream about 3D sculpting for stage and screen with Deborah Wright. Really cool. And Maxon Color next Thursday, and so on and so forth. Also, there is a design and animation tour. The next one is in Toronto, but that's in August. We have plenty of time to promote that. So just in case you come in late or you want to rewatch one of the live streams that we did earlier, you can always go to the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. And here you can find the recordings of all of these shows. If you're really new to Maxon and you want to learn one of the applications or maybe multiple of these, then you could go to cineversity.maxon.net, and here you can find all the Getting Started series for everything that we have, pretty much. And if you're even newer than that, you might have to go to the Maxon trial downloads and just start your 14-day free trial. So if you're new, just go to that site. It's maxon.net/try, and the link will also be shared in the chat. And last but not least, there is this website here. That's the Maxon merch shop. And now you can see that I didn't prepare myself good enough. There is a coupon code that you can use when you enter this site. It's ZBrush Sculpting. You just paste it here, then you continue. And then you can see a bunch of t-shirts. And you can order one t-shirt for free and you only have to pay for the shipping. Isn't that great? Cool. And that's basically everything that I wanted to show in the housekeeping section. I hope you liked it. But now we can get
loved it.
You loved it?
I loved it.
Thank you, Elly.
Such a great job.
Thank you.
It
means a lot. It means a lot.
I'm not going to participate in this show. I'm sitting in the darkness, observing. And
you're also quite quiet.
If I can be annoying, I will. So this is my new lighting scheme.
Hey, you're the mystery man.
I like it.
You are a little quiet, yeah.
Backlighting only.
It's perfect. It's perfect.
Just to let everyone know, my glasses are reflecting screens, and maybe on one of these there's some new software I'm working on. Maybe you can use.
Everyone's going to be like pausing and like zooming in and enlarging now to see if they can read anything. Just like got ya on the other screen.
Yep. Beautiful. It's beautiful. Well, I think people are here to learn a little bit of ZBrush and
Absolutely.
techniques and stuff like that from a floating head. So I would say,
Yeah. You might want to
Oh,
show us a bit more of you. Why are we seeing the ceiling?
Oh, that's a good question. That's actually
Why are we seeing the
because, hold
ceiling?
on, let me adjust. I'm on a laptop. I got a new laptop from MSI. And yeah, you got one too?
I got one too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's a new laptop. It has an Incore i9 chip. It's actually a really cool machine. So I was thinking we should stream from it. We should actually try it. And
We thought we'd tag team
I'm used-
on the MSI laptops and stream together on them because they are
I'm leaning
really
my I'm
powerful.
I'm so used to doing this with my screens.
That's
I don't like them
perfect.
straight up. That's perfect.
Just exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, just right.
Perfect. So let me adjust that so then I could do something.
Today's
more like
episode
this.
of ZBrush with the ceiling fan.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Yay. Okay, great. Focus. Perfect. All right. So let's all right. That's what we're doing. So real quick, fast and furious. This is where we're going to end with me. We're going to start in ZBrush, but then we're going to move into Substance. And so just kind of want to give you a little bit of a little sneak preview of what we're building today. And this is actually a lot simpler than a lot of people might think. So we're going to have some really cool fun with going about doing that. So let me actually pull up ZBrush here. And boop, let's go ahead and grab it. Perfect. Can you guys see that?
Yeah,
we can.
Cool.
That's great.
That's the whole project. That's it. That's all we're doing. I promise you. No. All right. So here's where we're going to ultimately end up with it. This is going to be just a nice little fun cube that we're going to do. So let's actually do this together, shall we? And as you can see, if you were already looking at kind of what I was doing here, this is actually how I kind of got the initial block out for the question mark. All this is going to become really relevant really soon. So what we're going to do is let's just go ahead and I'm going to just go ahead and hide my frame here, get used to the fact that the Windows key is a little bit different, and we're going to just switch out to a new project. But I'm going to keep this one here. So if you're starting with ZBrush for the first time and you're using a mouse, that's okay. You'll actually be able to follow along with a mouse. I do recommend a tablet, but if you're just starting out and you're trying it, that's okay. This whole project can be done with a mouse, so it is good. Do not worry. A lot of hard surface stuff, but it's gonna be fun. So if you're starting with ZBrush, you might see something like this, and then you can usually just kind of double click this project, which will get you started right away. Or what you can do is you can come on up to the simple brush, grab a primitive shape, which we're going to start with a cube 3D because that's going to make sense. We're going to just go ahead and drag that on out into this empty space. If you end up dragging multiple times, that's okay. Do not worry about it. You're actually painting in 2.5D and you're already an artist. So if you do this and you're into abstract art, that's perfect. But don't worry. You can just press Control N or Command N if you are on Mac. Actually, Control N works as well on Mac. And that'll just clear a screen, drag it out, and then come on up to Edit. So then you're in edit mode, which means that you can actually edit this 3D primitive however you would like to. And then once you're done editing that, we can just come in here and say make PolyMesh 3D. And then now we can actually do some sculpting stuff like that. So that is the way to kind of get in here and start playing. But again, you can also just kind of double click this cube project and you can be right where you want to be. So now that we have this, like I said, this is a follow along. So if you're sitting here after the stream too, and you're just rewatching the replay, congratulations. It's going to be awesome. You're going to love this. So what do we do with this? How do we actually end up making a thing in ZBrush, especially if you're new for the first time? Well, if you're brand new, we're going to have what we call subtools, which are basically objects that we're going to use to make our whole scene. And we're going to have this first one right up here. And I'm going to rename this my just cube base. I like to try my best to name my subtools so that they actually make sense. But the thing is that you might have noticed that we have a nice little pole right up here at the top, which is not going to give us a really nice, clean surface to work with on all 6 sides. So we actually need to kind of clean this up a little bit. So already I'm going to show you a really cool trick with using ZRemesher, which is ZBrush's way of getting really nice, clean topology as fast as possible. So here we notice that it's a cube and it has some sharp edges. And with ZRemesher, I'm going to take advantage of these sharp edges to give me some more even topology. So before I hit ZRemesher, because if you just hit ZRemesher at default, you might get something like this. And this isn't terrible, but you'll notice that there's a lot more edge loops towards the edges. Some of the actual edging is a little bit kind of muddled and not super sharp the way we want it. So I'm going to Control Z that, and well, I'm going to make some adjustments here. So the first adjustment is right down here in the middle of it. We have a few options. We have keep groups, detect edges, freeze borders, etc. The one we're really going to be focusing on is detect edges. And what's cool about detect edges is it's going to basically take a look at every major plane change, and then it's going to determine if that edge is strong enough to support. And if it does, it's also going to crease it for us, preserving our nice sharp edge. So I'm going to say detect edges, and then I'm just going to hit ZRemesher. And already you can see a night and day difference between what we got the first time we hit ZRemesher and then just turning on one other option. So right now we have something that looks really, really nice. And if I were to actually subdivide this by hitting Control D, and you can see now I have some subdivisions, which means I'm going to have some denser mesh, you can see that my shape didn't change at all. And that is because we have some really nice crease edging, which might be a little hard to see on the stream, but that is the major difference between there. So I'm just going to go ahead and step back down to subdivision level 1 and delete higher because we don't really need that. Okay, so now what I like to do is work in color a little bit. From time to time, my projects, it's kind of nice if I know I'm making a shape that has a certain color to kind of just lean in on that color. So on the left-hand side, I have this nice little color swatch. And you can see here, I could just come through and pick a color, and it's going to update on the fly. Now, that's not painting. That's just color selection. That just means that there's no actual paint or vertex coloring on this model. And so it's just picking up whatever I select. So if I come through here and I pick a color like this little kind of yellowish, orangish, greenish, brownish color, there we go. So maybe something a little bit more like that. If I come on up to color and say color object or fill object, now I can actually see if I change my color again to something else like this kind of weird green, it's not updating anymore. And that means that we actually painted that color. So we're going to go ahead and just keep this color here for now because it's going to help me see my object and where we're going to be going with that. Not totally necessary. It's just how my brain works. So do not worry. Okay, moving along. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to bevel these edges. And we're going to get something that looks a lot like what I showed you in the beginning. And so from here, what I'm going to do is we're actually going to come up and use a plugin called BevelPro, because this is going to make beveling super, super easy. So if I come up to Z plugin and hit BevelPro and I turn this on, it's actually going to pop on up and it's going to give me a new window. Can you guys see the window? That's the important part.
We cannot see a window. But when you say plugin, is it something that is shipping with ZBrush or?
Yes, it ships with ZBrush. So actually, let me do this. I'm going to remove my screen for a second because I was only sharing a window. And then I'm going to present again. We might get an inception happening here. Just FYI. I'm going to be try to be quick with this. Okay.
That's a good learning point. Never share a window. Always share a screen. I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. Well, I'm on one screen because of my laptop. So I'm like, let's try it. But that's okay. That is a good tip. All right. So we're going to go up to Z plugin, BevelPro, and we're going to turn this on. And then we get a new window, and you're going to get something like this. Now, I'm kind of coming into this section first because I do want to call out something that's super important with this. BevelPro works on polygroups, and we're going to get into polygroups in a second. But right here, notice that this just looks like a cube. Nothing is currently happening at the moment. And if I do a bunch of adjustments and let it update, literally nothing is happening. And that's because, again, it relies on polygroups. And so what are polygroups? So I'm going to go ahead and come through here and kind of cancel this operation. So polygroups is this red color. If I hit Shift F or come down here to this polyframe button, turn this on, this red that we're looking at, this is actually, and I'm going to brighten this up just a little bit with the new material. This is actually a polygroup. If I hit Control W, especially on Mac, hit Control W for this, because Command W on Mac actually closes ZBrush. So Control W. If I come through and click Control W, you can see I'm actually changing a polygroup. But BevelPro needs these polygroups to actually identify what it is we're trying to bevel. So the fastest way to do this is to, on the right-hand side, scroll all the way down until we get Polygroup menu. We're going to open that up, and we're going to come down to a groups by normal. And by default, it's set to 45-degree tolerances, meaning that as long as it's at least 45-degree tolerance angle, it's going to give you a new polygroup. So if I say group by normals, now you could see that every side of my cube is actually a different color. And this is exactly what we need. And the reason why polygroups are super important as well is because they're also like selection sets. So I can press Control and Shift and tap a polygroup and it hides everything else. And if I hit Control Shift again and drag out an empty space and let go, it will actually inverse that selection. And then I can quickly deselect or select other aspects of my model. So this is really good to kind of come through and also use as a selection set. And then to bring everything back, I just hit Control Shift and tap one time an empty space, and then that brings everything back to normal so I can see it. And just remember, that's just the hiding element of polygroups. That's not actually deleting anything. So you're just hiding it so that you can focus on the things. Because what's neat about that is I can hide this, and then I can actually grab a clay brush or something, and I can start sculpting on the visible piece while everything else is hidden. So that's also another important tip. So really, really important to kind of come through and utilize polygroups. Now that we have polygroups, we're going to go ahead, go back to Z plugin, and we're going to say BevelPro again, and you will now see a little bit of a difference in our screen. Now you're actually taking a look at a pink border that's actually framing my cube, and then you're also looking at some blue dots and some red dots. This might be a little hard to see on stream, but if you're following along, you'll actually see these dots. And these dots are actually looking at your bounding box. What it is, it's actually going to be affecting and what it's going to be cutting. And from here, again, I can actually choose how much of a bevel I want. So I can increase that bevel, and it's going to calculate on the side and just kind of give me an idea of what that looks like. And as it's calculating, it's just going to go ahead and make that adjustment. And depending on how complex your model is, sometimes it could take longer, sometimes it can be shorter, and it just depends. So here, not super complicated, but now, of course, we can't really see what it's doing. So we have a few other options. Besides just adjusting our options of what that's going to look like, we can also make it a chamfer or a bevel, which again, you can't really see right now because it's showing me this bounding box of where that is. I can hide this bounding box by hitting auto apply. And now if I take a look, you can actually see it's cutting this cube in a really interesting way. So it's giving me all the different cuts. Now, if I were to apply this with auto apply turned on, what it's going to do is actually apply this to the mesh itself. But if I turn off auto apply and accept it in this look, it's actually going to activate LiveBoolean, which is a really good system in ZBrush to make live updates and like cuts into your model without actually cutting your model until you're ready to do so. So it just live updates for you. So that's what LiveBoolean will do. So here I can also preview my edges and see what resolution I'm getting. So I can actually adjust this. I can kick this down if I wanted to, or I could kick this up. Because we're going for kind of a hero image of this cube, I do want some good resolution. And eventually I'm going to want some UVs. So it's going to be nice to have some decent cut marks here. And then again, I could just adjust any of the offset and kind of see what this look like. And this actually might be pretty good for what I'm going for. You can go as big as you want with this or as small as you want, as long as it fits. If you do see some random intersecting or clipping, then it's actually going to be pretty obvious. And then you can just adjust the amount, the smoothness, or even the angle if you would like. I think for what we're going for, this is actually pretty simple, and this will get a lot of people's feet wet when it comes to BevelPro. So I'm actually going to go ahead and showcase the LiveBoolean version of it. So I'm going to say OK, which is down here at the bottom. And now it's going to give me this. And if you see this kind of anti-aliasing effect that's happening, if I hit Shift F again, you can see here that it's actually doing a live update. And now, of course, I am getting some random clipping and stuff like that that I didn't notice before. So we'll go back and we'll make some adjustments. And this is where LiveBoolean will actually come into play, because let's take a look at what it generated. It generated this cage for me. And this cage is actually what is driving that cut. So now that we know that, if we actually turn solo map back on, we can actually come through here and inflate this cube cage a little bit. And now it's going to give me something a little bit more along these lines. And you'll notice that there's a different color that's happening at the moment. Well, that's because the color of the actual cage is white, but my cube is yellow. So if I wanted to make this the same color with that subtool selected, if I just press C for caret over the color I want, that will actually pick that color. And then what I could do is come up to color and fill object. And now I have that as well. If we go back to material, I can let you see that a little bit better. Then you have something like this. And then before I see if there's any questions, because I don't want to go too far too fast, what we can do is actually throw the stuff into a folder. Now in ZBrush's case, when you're going to save something for the first time as a ZTL, it's important to note that the very first cube that you actually have, or the very first object you have in your subtool, will become the naming convention of that ZTL. We could save a project file, but the thing with the project files is they tend to save all of the projects that you're working on within the tool set, whereas ZTL or a subtool folder or subtool project file will actually save just the current selection that we're working on. And that is what I would like to save to keep my file size of my project down. So I'm going to say save as, and then I'm just going to open up a new folder. And I'm going to say version 2. And then I'm going to name this a question mark box. Oop. And then I'm going to say that. And now you could see, if you look at the very first subtool and actually save that name, it just renamed that object question mark box. So that's okay, because I'm actually going to keep that cube as my starting spot in case I ever need to go back. It's actually a really good way to save like your base meshes or a project or like an object that you're like, I may want to repurpose this. Then that's actually a really good way to kind of think about using that first subtool. So I'm going to duplicate it. So then I have that, and then I'm going to rename this box. And then I'm going to put this in a folder. So I'm going to hit Control F, which will allow me to put anything into a folder. And I'll call this my box cut. So box underscore cut. I'm real clever with my names. I'm going to drop that cage into this area. And now that's being driven by that actual folder system itself. Any questions so far?
So far we have one that I would like to answer, or you can answer it. And what tutorials or class do you suggest to get me up on ZBrush quickly?
Oh, well, see, that's a great question. I'm sure you could share the link, but we actually have a Getting Started series on our Maxon website. It is called Getting Started in ZBrush. So it's actually done by an Anna Carolina, who is an amazing ZBrush artist. She's worked with us several times, and she ran through, it's about 24, 25 videos, but each video is about a few minutes long. I think the longest video is about 6 minutes, and it goes through all the different stuff. And by the time you finish that series, which is only a couple hours worth of actual content, you will be getting up to speed, quite frankly, and you'll be in it. What I will add on to that is ZBrush is a program that I recommend getting time or experience behind the wheel, as I call it. You definitely want to come in and play around, because it does operate slightly different than maybe a traditional 3D modeling program you're used to, like Cinema 4D. So it is just something that you want to kind of play with and just, you know, kind of come through the structure. But if you're following along with this, then you'll actually, after that Getting Started series, then you'll actually be really up to date with ZBrush pretty quickly.
Yeah, let me quickly bring this up. So when you go to the Maxon website, you can always go to Learn, and then you go down to Cineversity, and that's the site that you see here already. And if you scroll down a little bit, you find all the Getting Started series here. And here's the one for ZBrush. And yeah, it's a lot of stuff. We can pause that. But here's Anna Carolina, and there are a lot of videos that you can watch. And yeah, she's going to take you through all the basic stuff that you need to know.
Yep.
All right,
awesome,
back to your screen.
Very cool, very cool. Okay, so now we have this this cube that we're working on. And of course, too, I'm going to make a cut with this. So we're going to just come through and hit our little, with the folders, this is actually, I'm going to back up for a second. With the folders, what makes them so powerful is that not only can you just put objects in this folder and then rename the folder and say, that's really cool, you can actually make changes and do a lot of functions from the folder itself. So one of the functions that we're going to be doing is, because LiveBoolean was automatically turned on, which is actually this big button over here on the top left, say LiveBoolean. You could turn this off or on at any time. And this is actually going to be helpful too if you're trying to see if you had any colliding issues or something that was popping up that you're like, that's not looking quite how I wanted it to be. Then you can actually turn off LiveBoolean and take a look at it in real time, so you're not stuck looking at this like anti-aliasing look. So like, for example, here, this cage is pretty low topology. This is actually like, it's not quite as dense as maybe I would like that to be. So we can actually do a couple subdivisions on this to actually bring it up to speed. Because what I'm going to call out too is when you're using ZRemesher, the thing with ZRemesher is that it's going to do its best at the current state of the mesh to actually increase or decrease its topology. But when you're doing LiveBoolean, operations, if you have giant quads cutting smaller quads, then you're going to get like random triangles and points that may not connect well. So then after you do your LiveBoolean operation, if you then try to do a ZRemesher action, you might get a little bit of breakage. So if you see the difference between this topology here, as it's pretty low, and this here, it's also low, but it's a little bit more controlled, I actually think it would be better to subdivide this up and give me just a little bit more topology within this to support the action of cutting. So I'm going to come up to geometry, and I'm going to hit divide, and we're going to watch what happens, especially if you're new to ZBrush. If I hit divide right now, we got a little bit of rounding right about here in this corner. I'm going to back up and do that again. So I'm going to come through here, hit divide once, and you see it's actually trying to smooth, which is what this button right here is. The SMT next to divide is a subdivide smooth modifier. So I can actually turn that off and divide up a few times, and you'll see nothing is happening to that corner. But if I turn off my wireframe and turn it back on, you can actually see now that I have some other edge loops. And I can actually delete lower and make that a little bit more denser and something along the lines of what I would want. So now it just did that subdivision without smoothing it, so it didn't modify the look and feel of my cage. And that's going to be fine for what I'm going for today. And now I'm going to turn LiveBoolean back on. I have solo turned on down at the bottom, so I'm going to turn that off because LiveBoolean will show you everything that is visible. And if I had solo on, LiveBoolean is still on. It's just kind of ignoring the visualization of that because I'm just looking at one subtool. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this cut. So I'm going to close my folder by clicking it once, hitting the cogwheel, and then I'm going to say I want to Boolean my folder. And it's going to do any type of intersect, any type of cut, or any type of additive action that you set within your folder. Here, we're just making a cut. So I'm going to do this one time. And now it gave me a U mesh box. And if I hit the wireframe, you can see here, now this is what I have. And again, we have some denser mesh here in this area. And then we have some cutting, and then we have some different polygroups, right? So now I do want to clean this up a little bit and get this a little bit more to what I want, because this will be a little bit of a nightmare trying to get this into Substance Painter. So what I'm going to end up doing is the same exact operation that we learned. I'm going to go to Polygroups, and now I'm going to hit Group by Normals. But I want you to see what happens, especially to this triangle section right here. So if I say Group by Normals, well, nothing really happened. It all just kind of like freaked out, and then it just gave me one group. And that's because it just didn't identify this as a major change. And I also actually might see a little bit of lip action there. So maybe it might be best to go back and redo a cut. But let's see. First, I'm going to come here. And the slider that's next to Group Normals, it was set to 45. But I'm actually going to set this to 25. And then we're going to do a Group by Normals one more time. And you can see here now it's starting to identify the different plane changes. So if I set this to, let's say, 15 and say OK, Group by Normals, now it's giving me different polygroups for that action. But you know what? Whereas even we're doing a live demo and stuff like that, I'm still not liking this edge here. So let's actually do this. Let's go back one more time, which will be also good just to kind of go through the operation again. So I'm actually going to delete this one. And I'm going to delete this again because now my OCD is kicking in a little bit. And I'm going to go back in, turn off LiveBoolean, and we're going to show the other operation on that. And this way you'll also get to see both operations at the same time. So now I'm going to come through. I'm going to reset my initial settings that I set up before because it does remember the changes I made previously. And I also think that's really cool because once you identify something that you like, then you could just come back in and repeat that action, which is always helpful. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go to auto apply and take a look at that. And that actually looks to be just a little bit better than what I got before. Actually increase the amount just a bit, maybe put it to just a little bit above 1, and let's see what we got. And again, we'll give it a second. Perfect. Okay, that actually looks, that doesn't look too bad. Cool, and again, at any point in time, you could just come through and say, you know what, let me just manually type in a thing. So I highlighted that object by clicking it, and then just went ahead and just typed in my value. And so you can do that operation as well. And now that that looks like what I want, if I hit OK, come down here, now you can see that LiveBoolean did not turn on, but it did give me this operation as well. But again, now my different polygroups are only on the flat faces and not on the else. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go back down to polygroups, group by normals, and I'm going to set this to 25. And then say group by normals. And now this gives me a little bit something closer to what I was looking for. And you can see what I mean by those bigger triangles and that stitching job right there. So we can go ahead and take care of that when we ZRemesh it. But now I have some different polygroups, just looking at the box itself. All right, that's perfect. So now we're going to go ahead and ZRemesh this. So here at any point in time, when we ZRemesh, we want to just kind of preserve the shape of this. And sometimes what we can actually do is set a point in history of the shape and the viability, the fidelity of the mesh, how well the mesh actually looks. And we can actually store that point in history by pressing Control and tapping up here in our history bar. And you can see there's a little gray dot here. And this is just telling ZBrush, remember this point in history, as it's going to be super helpful for us. And then what I'm going to end up doing is when I come on down here to ZRemesher, so go to Geometry, ZRemesher, because Detect Edges worked so well the first time, that's what I'm going to start with again. So I'm going to say Detect Edges, but also notice I do have polygroups, and I can utilize that to my benefit. So to try to preserve this mesh a little bit, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to say Keep Groups On, but I'm going to turn smooth groups down to 0. And that's because smooth groups is trying to, it's going to ZRemesh the mesh. It's going to take the polygroups that we have, and it's going to try to kind of smooth them a little bit. And sometimes this can result in what some people would classify as shrinking. It's just going to give you some mesh deformation. And I don't want that. So I'm going to drop that down to 0. And then I'm going to go to adaptive size down here at the bottom, and I'm going to turn this down to 0. Now, you might be saying, you didn't touch that before. Why are you touching that now? And the reality is we have adapt turned on with ZBrush. And what that adaptive density button is going to do is it's going to take a look at the topology that you're calling out by target polygons, how many you want. And then it's going to look at the mesh. And then it's going to try to adapt the size of the quads as it's putting it around to try to give you a better fit. However, if you want even topology around your model, then what I actually do is turn that adapt size down to 0, and it keeps the quads as close to near the same size as much as possible, but still preserving the shape of my mesh. Now, right now we have about 13,000 active points. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to come here real quick, maybe drag that. Okay, what I'm going to do here is actually increase this up to about, let's say 15, which is a little bit higher than what we're currently calling out. And then I'm going to go ahead and say ZRemesher. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And you can see here that we got some crunchiness that is happening. And that is because what I called out for the information and what I'm trying to preserve is not enough information. So that's okay if that happens to you. There's a couple ways that we can actually troubleshoot that and get something more of what we want. The first thing that I automatically go to is I just turn off smooth, and I divide it up a little bit just to give me a higher resolution, and then I delete lower. This gives ZRemesher a denser mesh to work with out the gate and could sometimes help alleviate a little bit of those problems. And then the second thing too is maybe changing what I'm calling out. 15,000 wasn't a whole lot. So I might actually go up and say, let's try 20, 25 even. So that will give me about 25,000. And then I'll go ahead. And that's how I want you guys to think about that too. When you're calling out the count here, that 25 represents 1,000. So that would be 25,000 points. So if you're looking at a mesh that's like 2 million and you like hit ZRemesher at 5, you're trying to take 2 million and take it down to 5,000 points. So that's a drastic change. And so once you kind of know that, it's just good to like raise this number up a little bit and give it another shot. So let's go ahead and go through and hit ZRemesher again. And sometimes if we realize that, you know, detect edges maybe is not helping us, we could take that off as well, and we can try some different variations. So let's actually come through. Let's go. And let's give it a shot. It actually just kind of kicked out and said that there was a small error. So I'm going to try it again, and we'll go through this. Boop, boop, boop. All right. It's yelling at me today. So what we're going to do is we're going to see if we have any errors in our mesh. And this is important too. I'm not going to shy away from this. This is actually an important element. Sometimes when we make cuts with LiveBoolean, it's saying, you know what, there's issues with the mesh, and you may not be able to see these issues. So how do we know if we have issues with our mesh that we're trying to fix? The very first thing that we should do is, if you notice with ZRemesher in the same geometry menu area, let's actually go down to mesh integrity and let's check our mesh integrity. And right now it's actually saying that that is fine. So that's good. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is there might be a hole somewhere. You made a cut and it might not seem like there is a hole, but there could be a hole. So I'm going to come through here and say, you know what, let's actually come through and let's open up modify topology, which is in the same geometry set. I'm going to close holes. And then I'm actually going to, let's do one even better. I'm going to see if there's like floating topology that could be somewhere. So I'm going to go to Polygroups, go to Auto Groups. And what Auto Groups is going to do is it's going to identify every piece of geometry that's welded together or not welded together. And I'm going to just go ahead with my Control and Shift to activate my select. I'm going to go ahead and select this and then see if I can hide anything. And sometimes there's hidden mesh, which there's not. It's actually, okay, there's no hidden geometry. So that, let's give it a shot and see if that fixed it. Troubleshooting is always so much fun. Wouldn't you guys agree?
My favorite.
It's our job.
Especially live.
Yes.
Especially live, yeah.
It's always live.
It's not a demo unless something has to come up, but we always take these as learning moments. And I personally like those a lot. You know, sometimes it's helpful to see that, you know, even professionals or people who are in it every single day run across the same problems as those who are getting started. And so I like to take these moments as like ways to kind of go in and showcase how I would approach it, because there's not always a tried and true answer. Sometimes it's trying a few things. Okay, perfect. So now we're getting this, and this is not quite what I wanted. So let's back that up. Now let's try this one more time. I'm going to turn off detect edges. We're going to go back to polygroups. We're going to hit group by normals one more time, just to give us something a little bit different. All right. And then let's do this again, but I'm going to crease this up a little bit more and give this a shot. And so we might cover all the different ways to try a thing or two. Wow, this thing is yelling at me. Okay, great. So it's yelling at me, and that's not really cool. So let's do one other thing too. When in doubt, I say it's okay to start over. It's okay. This is why we actually have this cube here. So I'm going to duplicate this. That's way too many times because I want to be able to move on to the next spot. So I'm going to delete this guy, put this in a folder, box cut. Yes, this is awesome. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back up to BevelPro, and we're going to do the LiveBoolean approach. That seemed to work out fairly well. Yay, awesome. And let's give it a little bit more resolution. That sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. There's some collision that I see happening. That's fine. So let's actually adjust that collision then. Let's come back up here to BevelPro. Let's actually make that a little bit bigger.
Guys, Hashi is in the house, so
Hashi's in the house.
Don't say that again about him.
Okay. I promise I won't. So I'm going with a bigger bevel amount at this point, just to really just indicate that now I'm really encompassing that section. Hit OK. And then I'm actually going to take this. I'm going to do a scale up, just like we've done before. Going to move that underneath there. Give me this cut. Awesome blossom. Let's do a merge folder. We got something like this. And then let's go ahead and let's give our polygroups. Let's do group by amount, but I'm going to say 25 because I want to actually isolate this little triangle right here so that that's its own polygroup. Awesome. And then I'm going to subdivide up once without any smooth operation. So just rinsing and repeating everything that we had done up to this point. And now let's go ahead and let's do a keep groups down to 0, open this up to, let's say 20, got the size down, and let's give this another go. And I swear this is how I did it. Boom, there we go. Okay, much, much better. So that's looking a lot better and closer to what I would like to have. All right. Now that we have our box and we spent a long time on that, does anybody have any questions before we move on? And I'm just going to go up to color and fill object.
Well, there was a question. It was not related to a BevelPro, but I'm going to bring it up here. Is there any way to make a camera navigation to act like other 3D applications and not get tilted all the time?
Tilted all the time. Okay, so the camera navigation in ZBrush is actually quite interesting. So look at the camera navigation in ZBrush as your eyes, as you're sculpting. So ZBrush was intended to be an artist program and through the eyes of a sculptor. And so you have full freedom to run through. You can, however, set presets in a couple different ways to help kind of lock the camera in certain angles that you would like to see. And there's a couple ways you can actually go about doing that. You can actually come on up to movie up here in the top and then go to our timeline and show timeline. And then what you can do is you can actually set up markers in different angles that you have. Say something more like this angle here just to be different. And then maybe something like that to be different, right? And you can also use the cam view here to click and drag this around and get a more precise angle. But now with my arrow keys, I can actually navigate between the different viewports that I have set up. So I can look at my model like this, like that, et cetera, et cetera. So that is one way to do it. And the reason why I point that way out first is because that way you don't need to have perspective turned on. You can do it in both perspective and orthographic. The other way that you can go ahead and do it, which requires perspective to be turned on, so, and I'll show you with it off, is that if I go up to draw and I scroll down to the bottom, there is a select and store camera. And so what I can do is I can store a camera, but again, it says, hey, you have to have perspective turned on. So I'll turn on perspective and I can even set my focal length to, let's say 85, which is a little bit more like what you would see in portrait photography. And then I'm going to go ahead and say store camera, and I can name this whatever I want. I could say 1, and then I can do that again. I come on down, I can find a different angle, and then I can say store camera, call this 2. Okay, and now I can come back and forth, and I can switch between those. What's also interesting about this 2 is that if you have a bunch of cameras set up in, let's say, Cinema 4D, Maya, Blender, etc., you've set up a bunch of cameras and you bring in an FBX into ZBrush, the store camera will actually pick up all of those cameras. And I believe it's up to 250 cameras, if I'm not mistaken. So you can actually import cameras that you're using in other 3D applications and utilize them here as a way to see it. But the way we're navigating here is so that we actually have the ability and the freedom to move around our model and make changes quickly, which you would see quite often. ZBrush artists will be sculpting over here, and then we'll rotate them over here. We'll rotate, come back, and we're always moving around the camera point. So this is kind of our eyes on it. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think the question was actually if there is a way to lock the camera in a way so that, let's say, it's always well, not really lock it, but so that it's always pointing straight up and not like tilting this way. so that always the y-axis is pointing straight up.
Oh, well, okay. So there is some, so we do have some axis control. We can rotate on a different axis. So we can rotate on the y-axis here. It's default set to X, Y, and Z. You can actually pick Y to rotate around, but you can lock a camera too. You can just hit this camera lock button, and now I can't move. But then I can unlock it and I can move again. The navigation, the camera system is tied to the navigation. So there's no real way to really customize that, if I'm understanding the question correctly. But you can set the y-axis to rotate so that that's always on the up and down axis as I'm moving around. But yeah, that's about it as far as I'm aware.
I mean, it's fair because yeah, the freedom is important in sculpting. Sometimes you just get into like some area of the model when you like really have the freedom to rotate your camera along all axes.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. I know I've taken up a good chunk of time on making a cube, so hopefully everybody's super versed on that. Okay, so now what we're going to do
great
is
cube.
It's beautiful, right? Okay, now what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and make the question mark. And so we will be having this kind of like a cooking show a little bit, where I do have the final project that I built outside that, you know, everybody can also have links to once we're done. However, this is the process that we went through originally to end up making the first set of cubes. So now we're going to make the question mark, and the question mark is going to be quite fun. The way I approached it was a ZModeler approach, and that is because I wanted to actually introduce ZModeler to those who might be new to it, and also show a couple other really neat things. So the first one is that I just brought in a plane. So I went to insert and I inserted a plane 3D. And now I have this, and I just hit Shift F to look at the wireframe. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to build our question mark out of this. So the first thing I want to do is actually get this just a little bit lower. It's a little bit too dense for what I want. So I'm just going to come up to Geometry and Reconstruct Subdiv. And I'm going to do that one time. And then I'm going to delete higher. The reason for this is I want to use ZModeler to kind of paint my question mark. And I want just a little bit, I want to not have to pick like 100 different squares just to get the cube that I want. But I need something that's going to have enough density for this. And then I'm going to open up a ZModeler brush. So I'm going to hit B for brush. Don't let all these brushes scare you if you're new. That's okay. They're tons of fun. You should play with them. Hint, hint, wink, wink. I'm going to hit Z as the second button, which is going to narrow down all those brushes you just saw to the only ones that start with the letter Z. And then I have ZModeler. So I'm going to hit M, because if you see this little, might be a little hard to see. If I hit B, Z, there's a little orange icon that pops up once you've narrowed down the first selection of your brushes, and then that's your hotkey shortcut. So you're always going to hear me say like B for brush, Z for ZModeler, and M, and then that's gonna be the hotkey shortcut. Now I can actually come through here and manipulate the shapes of this. If you're brand new to ZModeler, just note that ZModeler does the vertices, the edges, and the faces. It controls all of those at the exact same time. The ZModeler brush, I don't think it's fair to actually call it a brush, because it's the hard surface functionality within ZBrush already. Like, it's a good chunk of it. So if I hover over a edge, a vertice, or a face, and I press and hold the space bar, I'm going to get a bunch of options. And if we just start from the top and work our way down, that's the order of operation in which we're working. So in this case, I'm actually going to want to go ahead and just note that these options are going to exist, because we're going to call them out as we go. So I'm going to come in here, and if I press and hold Alt with the ZModeler active, I can actually create temporary polygroup selections. And this is going to be super helpful when I'm trying to just draw out my initial cube. So or my question mark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press and hold Alt, and I'm just going to go ahead and start, let me just start kind of painting out a little section that should look kind of resemble a question mark. And as you can see, if I go over, or if I draw too much of one thing, then I could just tap back over that thing, and then that's going to clear that space out. So I'm going to come in and kind of get something that looks like a question mark. And then maybe, so I got 4 and 3, so I'm actually going to clear. So now we get to kind of just see if this actually plays out well. Okay. There we go. Question mark. That's close enough, right? So now that we have what I want, and now notice too, I'm actually keeping it 3 rows per each section. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This is actually 4 here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I actually get to get rid of that and get rid of that. So I can go this way. Boop. Up. Deleted an edge loop. Don't worry if you delete an edge loop, just hit Control Z. That's okay. It just means you selected an edge loop. There we go. That's a little bit better and a little bit more concise. So now I have my cube here. And what can I do with this? Well, I can hover over that face, press and hold the space bar. And with QMesh right now selected, it's saying a single poly will actually be affected, but I want to affect everything of the same poly group. So I'm going to say polygroup all. And then that's just in the second. So that's our main target, what it is this object is doing. Everything else, let's just ignore that. We don't need that. And now I'm going to drag this out. And you can see here that it's actually pulling out that shape. But wait, it's attached to the plane. Ian, what are you doing? And that's a great question. So I'm actually going to back that up. I'm going to show you a little trick, a little gem, as we call it. I'm going to zoom in here. And as I drag the shape out, if I press and hold Control, it's actually going to separate that mesh out and give me a whole new shape with a whole new poly group than what was actually identified here in the beginning. And so I can actually make that selection set, grab that section right there, and now I can come up to Geometry, Modify Topology, and Delete Hidden, because now that selection set was hidden, and I want to delete that. And now I'm left with this question mark. And now what I could do is I can actually come through, and with that same function, I didn't change anything. I just went ahead and dragged out a little bit more to give it some thickness. And now I have my question mark that I want to have. And from here, we could do one more thing, which is I want to give this a little bit of actual other topology, but I do also want to make maybe some beveling or some really cool changes, because the question mark in question is actually has some little shapes to it. So before we start like cranking up the density, I'm going to show you a couple other things, which is if I actually hover over that face and I do, let's say, like a bridge action, for example, I can actually select 2 different polys, and I can say, I want to bridge these points here and maybe these bridges here. And this will actually give me a really nice kind of round effect. I can even hover over this edge, press and hold Alt, and I can actually collapse that edge. And that'll also give me some little bit of beveling action. So I could come through here, actually just maybe just come in and customize my shape just a little bit more. I don't like that one. And so I could do this for my entire model if I think that this works out well. Or we could just back it up and keep it super sharp. It is.
We actually had a question. I think this is what Chocho is referring to, and it's as if you knew by magic to answer the question. So if this is what you're talking about, then cool. But they may also be wondering about beveling or chamfering the actual edges.
Oh,
so
okay, great.
We shall find out.
Perfect. Well, so the way I was doing this with this edge loop, if I press and hold the space bar with the insert right here selected, this allows me to insert any edges that I want, right, in almost any direction that it will allow me to. But with the Alt option, that actually will kind of delete or collapse that edge. And so that's a quick way to bevel this area here. If I wanted to bevel this, there's 2 ways I can do this. I can do this with ZModeler, which is, again, that's just that Alt delete. That's going to do that edge. There is a bevel option. If I press and hold the space bar over the edge, go to bevel, and I pick this, I can also do beveling like this, and that will give me some beveling. So this is a way that I can go about doing this type of manual beveling with ZModeler. Or I can actually do this via sculptural approach if I have enough topology. So let me actually just subdivide this up a few times to give me some density to this and hit that lovely, lovely Windows key. I can actually pick the BevelFlat brush right here. And what this will do is this will give me that sculptural approach. I'll click one time, press and hold, come through, and then I can actually come in and do a sculptural bevel as well. And if you look at my topology, it actually try to preserve that as much as possible. And the cleaner your mesh, the cleaner the edge that you'll actually get. So I could do this as well. So if you want to take a sculptural approach to that, you can. What I did and what I recommend doing for this one is going to ZModeler and just doing an edge collapse. Of course, we can't have any topology, or we can't have any subdivisions when we do that. So come over here, go insert, and then just kind of collapse that section. So there's a few ways. You can also use BevelPro as well to come through and do that. Let's actually do this. I'm going to show you something as well. Did that answer that question, by the way? Hopefully that did.
I think so. Yes.
I think so too, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Now, something else I'm going to show you with ZModeler, which is same with the insert on the edge, but if I go to multiple edge loops, and then down here at the very bottom, I'm going to go ahead and just say keep polygroups. I want to keep everything the same, but I can have alternate polygroups. If I drag this out, by default, it's going to give me new polygroups. But what's cool about this, if I do keep group, is that if I want a perfect edge loop down the middle of some random row that I'm picking, if I have just a single edge loop, it's just going to place it wherever I click. So I'd have to try to get really perfect. And that's too much work. I'm lazy. So I'm going to go to multiple edge loops, keep group, and I'm going to click one time. And notice it gave me 2. That's because I remembered the last stroke I did. So I'm going to drag this out, come back up to just dragging 1. And that's just clicking and then dragging down or up with your mouse or tablet. And then that's going to give me some edge loops that are perfectly in the middle. And then I can tap and repeat that action. And why I would want to do that is maybe what I'm looking for here is that I actually wanted to maybe just give me a smaller bevel. Or that bridge that I had selected on the face. So if I hover over the face and then go to bridge, I can actually have smaller polygroups here. So it gives me just a little bit of a cleaner edge like that. So those would be smaller at that point. And then let's come over here, tap middle, tap middle. So you can see it actually gets really quick on how we can kind of come through and customize that stuff. And then I'm actually going to add some edge loops, and I am hovering over the wrong one. Let's go edge, single edge, and then I'm just going to collapse that one down. And the same thing here. I'm going to collapse this one down. So we can start customizing the different shapes of our question mark here. And then once we're satisfied with all this, I can actually give it some thickness. So I can come in here, or not thickness, rather, it has thickness. I can give it some edge loops to support that thickness. And now this is the important part, something I wanted to cover when it comes to anytime you're going to have a super low mesh and you're going to move into Substance Painter, edge loop control is super important because you want to be able to preserve all these super nice edges that you're dropping in here. So what we can do is we can actually come back to our single edge loop and start adding in some edge loops that are close to the edges that we want to remain relatively sharp. And this is a great way to keep things really low, but still have the protection of the edges. And since I want to make sure that all of this gets protected, I would take the time to come through here and actually start protecting some of these edge loops. And actually I'd pick this one. And so I'd come through and just kind of kick this in because it will notice that, and we'll take a look at this edge loop down here. If I hit D for dynamic subdiv, it's going to pop up like, hey, do you want this? It's kind of cool that this is actually a question mark in asking me a question. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, always. Now notice here, I'm actually getting some nice edges, but right down here, all of this rounded off. So this is telling me that if my model was to get any type of smoothing algorithm applied to it in the final render, that this is too low for that topology. So if I go ahead and add in some protective edge loops and then hit D for dynamic and showcase that smoothing, this is actually showing me a little bit nicer of that edge loop. And this is how you would also want to kind of come through and protect some of these edges. So you'd want to come through and take the time. That's one approach to do it. Or the way I chose to do it, because I knew that this was going to be it wasn't going to be animated, and it didn't really matter if it was a little bit denser than normal. So I actually came in here and I added in some different edge loops, kind of got me like an evil one. And then I just went ahead and did a subdivide a few times to just give me some denser mesh. It's not super high. I think this mesh is like, it's 20,000. Substance can handle that no problem. That just gave me a little bit more control from there. And then now I want UVs on my mesh because everything that we have to move to work in Substance Painter is actually going to need UVs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come through and I'm going to go to Polygroups. And this is the fastest way to do something. If you don't really need super clean UVs, this is a really fast way to do this, which is, of course, do group by normals, get our different groups here, and then I can come up to Z plugin, and I can go with UV master, and I can unwrap by polygroups, not symmetrically because this model is not symmetrical. So I'm going to say unwrap, and it's going to give it a second. And now it gave me some UVs, and we could see those by coming down on the right-hand side to UV and then hit morph UV. And you could see it gave me some super beautiful, amazing UVs, but it'll be good for what we want. Those are just like quick, dirty UVs that I would want. And now we have our question mark, but now we have to apply our question mark because it's hidden and we can't see it. It's right here. So we're going to definitely want to give this some love. So kind of going through, hopefully everyone's coming through. Hit me with questions if we got it.
We do actually have a couple of questions based on what you just did. So let me find them. So from Kiza, why doesn't ZBrush allow geometry to have n-gons that doesn't that make low poly modeling a little challenging at some points?
That's a great question. It's the way I understand it, it's based on the way the subdivision algorithm is actually functioning. So yes, ZBrush does not support n-gons at this point because you cannot subdivide n-gons.
Cool. And then this one from Jamie. Is there a rule for how many polys can go to Substance for a model from ZBrush?
You know, we did ask the team that they were here, and their response was it can handle a lot. And I'm actually quite surprised on how much it can handle. The rule of thumb is what is your project going to and what should you be supporting in that pipeline process. If you're going to games, then as low as you can go that the team agrees on, that's what you'll have to try to preserve, which is why I mentioned the edge loop supporting, that you want to kind of go through and make sure that you have good edge loop support through all the edges that need to retain and be sharp. So that's a good shortcut to go through. It just depends. If you're doing like what we're doing, we're just going straight into our final 2D render, and that's about it. Then it doesn't really matter. As long as you're not overloading your system, because a lot of that too is system based. So definitely check your specs on your hardware and see if that lines up to what they recommend. Because if you're running into those issues, it could just come down to hardware space as well. But their answer was a lot, not millions and millions like ZBrush, but quite a lot. So, and I personally have thrown in at about 5 to 6 million, and it ran okay. So I would say
I'm also thinking if you're then going into like 3D software next, like let's say like C4D or Blender or something, if they can handle it, then take it that Substance can handle it as well.
100%. Yeah. And I gave you a pretty dense version of this, I think. I gave you like a few 100,000 easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a similar question, I guess it's the same kind of thing from Casey, about having a target poly count for a subtool going into Substance Painter for optimal results whilst texturing. I guess the same kind of thing. Have a look at what they potentially recommend on
it's exactly. Yeah, it's whatever it is recommending. Again, a lot of like right now, like games and film, they are using Substance Painter a lot. And then I do know that some other, like some motion graphics companies I've spoken to, and then even some toy companies have started utilizing Substance, but it's not a whole lot. So ideally, keeping it as low as possible that makes sense for the project is that's the target. So if you have a character that is like, you know, a hero character that like 200,000 total polygons, it's going to handle that no problem. And typically, like a good hero character today in games can range between 200 to 500,000 active points, at least from the pipelines I've seen and been a part of. So I would say in that aspect, that is more than enough, you know, because that's what the thing. Your high poly, if you're doing a high to low poly bake where you're working on the low version, but you're baking all the high details to the low version, the other answer to that is as long as the low version can support and capture the high version correctly. And if you're working with something that it can't, then and you're having collision issues or you're having edge loops issues, then you want to make sure that your low model can support all that stuff. And a great way to try that is actually in ZBrush. I'll do a lot of test bakes where I'll take my low version that I think is good, and then I will project details from the high to the low and see if it captures it relatively decently, or do I get a lot of collision? And if I do end up getting a lot of issues, then typically I will then make the changes in ZBrush. So that usually cuts out any errors I would get in Substance.
Cool. There's actually 2 more quick questions. They are off topic, but I think you're the perfect person to ask.
Okay,
So Silent Moon was wondering, how many characters do you think is enough to put in a portfolio to look for a job as a junior character artist?
Ooh, that's okay. That's a fantastic question. Are we full screen for a second? Could we be full screen for a second?
Do you, as in, you want to be full screen, or
no? Just like I feel like we're just looking at ZBrush. We can pull ZBrush down for a second, because that's a great question. And basically, the best answer for this question is, it's a little complicated, but just follow with me. 1 is good enough if it shows everything that you need to have, right? If you have 10 characters and they're all subpar and they're not showing good wireframe, they're not showing good maps, then at the end of the day, it's not going to matter. No one's going to look at the portfolio because they don't see what they're looking for. The best thing to do is for every piece that you have on your portfolio, it should be the best of what you could do currently. And so if you have 1 character in your portfolio, right, and then it showcases everything correctly, it showcases the sculpt, showcases the wireframe, please show the wireframe, do not hide that. It showcases a good map layout, and you're showcasing a nice solid render, and you even sometimes can go an extra step and show it even in like Unreal Engine as like, look at what my character is, and you give all those good things, 1 character would be good enough to get hired. However, if you do want to have a few in your portfolio to really showcase, but it needs to be the best. So at the end of the day, focus on quality over quantity, and that will help you out so much. I've seen people get hired with 1 or 2 sculpts, 1 or 2 projects in their portfolio because they showcased everything. And the other aspect to this is, don't be afraid to show everything either. I see too many people hiding wireframes. Don't do that, because no one's going to look at it. Because at the end of the day, when they don't see a wireframe, their first thought is, well, what's wrong with it? This is a game character. It's supposed to be in a game. You need to see the wireframe. You want to be able to, don't leave any questions, because at the end of the day, a lot of recruiters are only taking seconds, 10, 20, 30 seconds max to look at you. And so they're going to take a look at the very first one they see. And if it doesn't line up, they could move on. And if you do get rejection letters, just, send a nice friendly email. Hey, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. And then ask them, hey, was there anything that maybe you saw that I can improve on, and try to get some feedback, and then implement that feedback immediately and then reapply. So there's a little tips on that.
Or you can start screaming at the people that rejected you. Go on a grade. Just guarantee that changing career is your best path forward.
Yeah. Good job. Very cool.
No,
all right, and you said
I love that answer. Yeah. So there was 1 more from Moaz about sculpting a hand, finding it really difficult, even with references. Do you have any advice when it comes to things like the fingers and the bottom part of the thumb? Anywhere that is a good place they could go to learn, maybe?
Your hand is your best reference. No, I'm being serious. I'm not passing it up. Your hand is the best reference. I'm not even kidding. I don't know if you can see my screen large enough, but I have these toe thumbs. Okay, these guys right here. And what's funny is my first few sculpts, one of my early teachers.
We may have lost Ian.
No, what? Did we lose me? No, I'm still here.
No. Ian is here.
Oh,
here.
are we all back?
I'm back.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. See this thumb? That's my toe thumb. Okay, I have toe thumbs. I'm like Megan Fox. Look that up. That's a random fact you just learned today. Megan Fox also has this thumb. Okay. Your hand is the best reference. Really study your hand. If you're right-handed, look at your left hand while you're sculpting, and you can move it all sorts of areas. But the thing is that little rules of thumb is that like your thumb can touch the pads of all your fingers. Okay. And then from the tip of your middle finger to the base of your palm is the size of your face. Right. And then your middle finger is the same length as the palm of your hand. Measurements. Everything measures against itself on the human body. So your hand is the best reference, but no joke. The reason why I brought up my toe thumb was one of my early teachers, Shane Olson, if you're watching. I had some toe thumbs before, and he called it out one time in a critique, and he was just like, hey, your thumb's a little funky. And I was like, look at my thumb. Look at it. It's here. It's real. And he laughed and we joked, and then everything was fine. So at the end of the day, your hand's the best reference, but really study it. It's really going to help you out. And then just take time. Sculpting a hand's like sculpting a character. There's a lot happening with it. And then I would say make one finger really, really well, and then just duplicate it. And then just note too, there's an arch. This just became anatomy lessons, guys. Sorry. There's arch to your hand. Your hand is not flat. Like there's actual curvature to your hands. So, and there's curves everywhere. It is not a box. It is very much curvy, wavy. So really just look at that.
Oh, thanks.
I
And a few people putting references as well in the chat.
And I like to draw stick fingers. That's it. 5 little straight lines coming from one point. I mean, you can never go wrong with that.
Exactly.
Say it's stylized. Cartoon with
it's
stubborn
stylized.
hands.
Not that I'm totally incompetent in drawing. Yes, it's
always
stylized.
just stylized.
Everyone, it's stylized.
Yep.
Thank
okay. Yeah. So we have already gone really long, and that's good. So let me finish this up real quick. So, Elly, could you put my ZBrush back on? I don't want to inception too many people.
There you go.
Okay, cool. So let's finish up. We only have a couple more things, and then it's off the Substance Painter, and then I'll show you a breakdown of how I approach Substance Painter. So real quickly, I have this guy here, and what we're going to do now is we're going to use ArrayMesh. I'm going to show you something cool. So I got my cube. I'm going to bring up my question mark. Yay, there it is. And I'm going to recenter this to the world center. It's going to be super helpful for me. So I'm going to press and hold Alt to unlock my gizmo. And I'm going to center that to the very center of this model. And then I'm going to let go of Alt, which locks it again. And then I'm just going to hit the home button. And there we go. And now you're like, great, can't see anything. Well, do not worry. I'm going to hit transparency. Now you can see it's right in there, right? Now we're going to use ArrayMesh to actually get this to duplicate. So I don't have to copy and paste and be all like trying to be all precise without needing to be precise. If that makes any sense. Let's actually scale this down just a little bit. Just give me a better visualization of where that would be. Okay, beautiful. So now we're going to go up to ArrayMesh, and with my nice little question mark selected, I'm going to turn on ArrayMesh. I'm going to click the transpose and lock position. What this will do is that it will allow me to use the transpose or the gizmo via ArrayMesh, and it's going to lock the main position, meaning where the model currently is. It's not going to let me move that. I'm not going to pick lock size because I may want to adjust the size ultimately, so I'm going to leave that, and I'm just going to go ahead and turn this on. So now I have this. What do we do? Well, cool part is that I'm moving this around and nothing is happening. Well, what we're going to do to set this up is actually control the axis in which it works on. So if you ignore all of this middle stuff and do not pay attention to anything except for where it says repeat, and we're going to type in 4. So I want 4 of these. So this includes the first one as well. So I want to repeat that 4. Ignore everything else. Forget all that. We don't need any of that. And we're just going to come down here to the bottom, and we're going to do a rotate, and we're going to rotate on the Y axis. And I'm just going to move the slider just a little bit. And you can see here, that's what that looks like. I'm going to move the slider just a little bit, but then I'm going to type in, the 360. Yeah, type in 360. So now when I do this, boom. Now when I'm moving this forward, it's moving all of my question marks right where I want them to be. It's because I spun it around 360 degrees, and now it's allowing me to work on all of that. So I'm going to bring that up, say something like this, turn the transparency on, and everything is perfectly aligned right where I need that to be. And the fun part is this is just a preview. If I turn on my wireframe, you'll see here only the actual model is the wireframe that's turned on. Everything else is just a preview. So I could set this, say something like there, beautiful. And then I'll say, okay, that's all I want. So then I'm going to go ahead and say make mesh. And now everything is mesh. This is actually what I want. And I'm happy. Everything is good. And we can move on to doing the exact same thing, but now with like some little cylinder pieces here. So
Ian, is there like snapping in ZBrush? So Kizzy was wondering about snapping vertices to other vertices and how we would do that, if you can do that.
I believe snapping is done by Gizmo. What we do have an align function, but that's not what he's asking. I want to say, let me see something, because we have snapping and rotation. But to vertice, I want to say no. You know what? Let me find out. When I hand this off to ZBrush, let me come back to this question. Let me double check my answer before I give you a solid answer.
That's cool.
Because I can't remember at the time. Stumped me.
You win a prize.
You win a prize, yay! So I'll come back to that, I promise. Okay, so now I have this, and I'm going to label this my quest mark. Why not? And then this is my main box. Okay, perfect. We haven't saved this whole time. You're running Brave if you haven't saved. So I'm actually going to go ahead and hit the save button, which will go ahead and do that. And now let's just really quickly, with everything we just learned, let's make those little dots that end up on the sides or the edges of those. So I'm going to go insert, grab a cylinder. Just going to solo this, which is this button all the way down here at the bottom right-hand side. And you'll see, pardon me, you'll see here that we actually have this interesting little sphere here. And I'm just going to bring up the ZModeler, which I actually haven't even dropped. I still have it selected. So I'm going to go, I'm actually going to do this. Instead of just kind of manually adjusting this, what I could do is come on down here to Polygroups and group by normals. Gives me a totally different normal set. And then I'm just going to hover over the face and go to Inset, Polygroup All. I'm actually going to inset this section right about here. And then I'm going to, from here, go to QMesh, and I'm going to drop this down. Give me just a little bit of depth. And then I'm just quickly going to give myself some topology. So I'm going to hover over the edge, multiple edge loops, keep polygroups. I'm going to come in and drag out some different spots just to give me a little bit of information to throw at substance. Should be good. And then I'll even, again, edge loop support. I'm going to add in a couple here and here, just to preserve that edge a little bit better. And there you go. That should be good enough for what we are going for. So if I hit D for dynamic, you'll see here that that smooth look is actually quite nice. So, and we can even, if we wanted to, because we're going for something a little bit high res for a close-up hero shot of this cube, I'm even just going to subdivide that a few times and then delete lower, just so I have that. And then, of course, too, I'm going to come on up and unwrap this by polygroups. Again, you just want to make sure everything has UVs on it before we move it on down to Substance Painter. And then now, just like we did the question mark, the cool part here is that we can actually utilize this. So I'm going to hit transpose. We're going to use ArrayMesh in the same way. So I'm going to come through here, but I'm going to show you a trick with ArrayMesh that you can use, especially if you're learning ArrayMesh for the first time and you're still like kind of understanding all these like menu sets. I'm actually going to do the transpose, ArrayMesh on, transpose on, lock position on. And then I'm going to go ahead and say 4, just like we had done before. So 4, not 45, 4. And then I'm going to now, I want to rotate this around. So I'm going to rotate this again on the y-axis at 360. And then what's cool about this is I can drag this out. I can also use the gizmo to rotate my model. And this is why I don't lock the size. I can actually scale this down. I can move this up over here in the corner and get a position that I like. And it's affecting everything. I could say, yeah, something like that. And then what's cool about this is I can actually control drag a duplicate of my mesh, clear my mask, and I can do that again. Say something like that. And I can clear that. And then I could set this in the center position. Woo, Inception. At home and put all those where I want them to be. Just reposition them so they fit nicely and then make mesh. Now I have my entire cube made here in ZBrush. I know we went on a bit of a tangent and we also did some troubleshooting, so it took a little bit longer than I expected, but we are here and I'll call this, I'll call this my silly. That was silly. Okay, great. Now what we need to do is actually turn around and export all this out. So I'm going to come through here, and only the things that are visible is where my export is going to be. Again, make sure that your low has all of your UVs and stuff preset. And if you do it the way I did it, then everything will have your UVs on there. And again, you can always check yourself too by coming down to UV, hitting something like solo, and you can morph that and you can see your UV sets and stuff like that. And if the stacking is too much and you're not too sure about the stacking, you can even come through and just redo the UVs again by coming up here and doing a UV unwrap, and then it will go through and hit it. So you can re-UV anything if you want to keep things nice and separate, and it will repack it, auto unwrap and pack for you. I had actually hit it, so it's actually doing it. Beautiful. Any questions so far?
No, not really. So we did have one actually at the very beginning from Matthew Hinman. Hey, Matthew, how's it going? Asking about when you're done, will this be printable? He's keen to follow along and try and build one for 3D printing.
Yeah, you could. This would actually be watertight. I would just merge things together that you would want, make some cuts wherever you needed to, make it. I would run a Dynamesh pass over it, or just make sure that your object is watertight. By coming up the transform with your selected subtool. So let's do our question mark. We come up here to transform, analyze, select the subtool, pick whatever measurement system makes sense for you. And as long as it says watertight, like it does here on my screen, then this will be 3D printable. And that's the key part right there. So yes.
Cool. Also, whilst you were doing this, I had a little look on YouTube for snapping components. So edges, faces, vertices. And believe it or not, the man himself, Michael Pavlovich, has done a tip on this.
Perfect.
So I wonder,
cool.
should I... That's a good, reliable source, right? I can just drop that right in the chat. Is that cool?
Oh, absolutely. Michael Pavlovich is great. He has a lot of those good tutorials, and we actually point to a lot of his tutorials on Cineversity. He is someone who helps contribute to Cineversity that way. So that's actually a really great resource.
There.
Yep. And let us know too, if you take a gander at that while we're still live, let us know if that is what you were looking for as well. Because we have a lot of other interesting features. We have like snap to align. We have some really interesting good stuff down here. I wasn't sure if that's quite what you were thinking. There's also some modifiers as well under the gizmo. There's actually like some modifiers that can help with that coming through, and some other interesting stuff. So
cool. Also, just quickly before we move on, we have two more quick questions. One from Silent Moon saying, is it okay to let your UVs overlap if you do not plan on baking?
Ah, great question. So stacking UVs is a thing. And as long as it, like in that case with the same object and the way, like to take up less space, I've stacked UVs on top of each other before. It just depends on your workflow and how you like to look. If the object is very similar, like you have the same shape, the same objects, I've stacked before because it saves space and it helps out. So yes, you can, even through baking. But if you do have any errors that come through as a result of that, that's something to make sure that they're stacked properly instead of just, there might be some overlap or some issues that you don't see at the surface, but when you zoom in, you see that there's some overlap, and that's giving you some random information. So
cool.
just double check all that.
Another one talking about importing FBX from IC Film. If I import FBX that was made in Maya, but then import it into a new subtool and I append the FBX subtool into that, am I currently modeling?
Wait, can you say that again?
Oh, okay. So I think it's a two-parter. So if I import an FBX that I made in Maya, but it imports into a new subtool, and if I append the FBX subtool into the subtool that I'm currently modeling, how can I import all the FBX objects into the subtool that I'm working on? This is the second part.
Okay. So here, I'm going to just let me cover the export first, and then I'll cover the import, and then we'll be moving to Substance. So real quick, I do want to export all this stuff out. So I have everything here. I've double checked to have UVs, etc. So I'm going to hit export, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say FBX, and I'll just say save, and then it's going to pop up. Well, why did it do that? Why did it give me that? Let's go here to FBX export. Let's try that again. Export. That's fine. Say that. Wait, what? Okay, let's do it this way. So let's go here to FBX export import under Z plugin. Should be the same thing. It gave me a weird error message. I'll have to look that up later. But I'm going to come up here. And so I want to save everything that's visible, all the things that I'm seeing. I have a few different selections. If you do this from export here, FBX export, it's going to pop up the same options. So it's more of the same. So I actually want to pick everything that's visible. And then if I was like moving into like Maya up, that's actually defaulted. I could select through all the open, all the different ones that I want, like Maya up, Maya Z up, 3ds toolbag, Unity, etc., etc. It's defaulted Maya Y up because that's pretty universal for most people, so we leave that there. A lot of this is just similar, and I'm just going to go ahead and say export, and then I'll go ahead and save my tool. Say yeah, I'll replace that one, and then anything that was visible to ZBrush, i.e. just at this point, the cube, the cylinders, and the question mark, those are the only things that are actually visible. So that's all it's going to take. If I would have selected all, it would do everything, even if it wasn't visible. So that's that approach. Now for importing, if I were to come back and say import, and then I'm going to import this FBX here, I'm going to say import. And it's going to ask me a few questions. Should I import cameras, et cetera, et cetera? You can uncheck that if you want, but a lot of this, again, I just kind of leave as default, but it's asking, should I import materials as polygroups, selection sets, materials, et cetera. So I'll just say, okay. And then what that does is that, yeah, so that comes through. Now, see, it's asking me, remember we touched a bit about cameras. It's saying, do you want to replace or append new cameras? That means that it recognized that the FBX had cameras and is trying to replace it. So I'm going to say replace. That's fine. So it brought in one camera, which is perfect. And yes, when you import, it brings it into a new section. Now, how do I copy and paste all of this into my next project? So what I can do is one of two approaches. I can either go to my main project and yes, say append, and then it'll say there's my box, but it's going to bring in just the single object. The other way that you could do this is actually put all of this into a folder. So I can open up folder, rename it, drag some stuff into that folder. So now I have this. And then what I can do is I'm just going to go up to I'm going to go up to, where are we at? There we go. I'm going to go up to Z plugin, subtool master, and then copy that folder. And then I can go back up to Z plugin, subtool master, paste folder. And now it's going to paste that folder into your new section. So you could do that. So if you have like a lot of different subtools, that's the fastest way to do it. Put them all into a folder, and that'll be the way to go. The way to do that faster than the way I did it, which was you saw me come through and literally just drag one thing at a time. If you got like 100 of these things, then turn on the gizmo, open up the pizza box, select everything, and then hit Control F. And as long as you have to have at least one thing deselected. So if you had like an extra subtool, like let's say it's your nice little cylinder here. I'm sorry, your sphere. Wow, can't even do that. So this is a sphere, Ian, not a cylinder. Okay, so if you had everything like this, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the gizmo here. I'm going to select just everything here and not the sphere. And I hit Control F. It's going to ask you, hey, you have a lot of things selected. Do you want to put them in a folder? Just say yes, and then it will ask you to name that folder, call this your box. And now notice everything in my subtool list got into a folder except for the sphere, because that's the one we did not select. So that's a way that you could quickly take hundreds of subtools, put it in a folder, and then C plugin, copy paste, and you're good to go. Awesome, awesome. Any other questions before we move into Substance?
Yes. So Chocho was asking, remembers there is a workflow using Polypaint and then importing that into the render without sending it to Substance. Is that good in the industry? Is that like a good workflow that is popular?
That's actually a very interesting question, because it depends on the workflow. So there are projects I've done that utilize vertex coloring, and I didn't need to throw things into Substance Painter. So that is a way. There's also times where I've used vertex coloring by just creating a map, because I have my UV maps here, great texture, and then I can actually come here to create. So like, for example, here, let's just do some UVs on this guy real fast. Air UV master, unwrap them real quickly. Ba-da-ba. Okay, great. Then I come here to texture, and then I could do new from Polypaint. And now I'm running a texture set on that. So if I change the color here to red and then said fill object, still yellow until I turn that texture off. So you can use Polypaint, and you can create texture maps in ZBrush to use for your final project. It just depends on the project. So it depends a lot. I would say whoever you're trying to work with and showcase the pipeline, see what tools they're using, and then learn those tools.
Cool, thanks. And Jamie was wondering, when you're using, will the FBX use the ArrayMesh, or do you have to make that a mesh?
I recommend making it a mesh, because we want the physical objects in Substance Painter. The ArrayMesh is good for when you're in ZBrush and you're actually trying to just show a thing, but you're not committed to it 100%, or it's just a fast way to duplicate objects like what we had here.
Cool. Yeah, I think that is all the questions so far. Thanks.
Okay, great. So now, how do we get all this into Substance Painter?
Yeah.
Bada bang, bada boom. Okay, you're done. Just load up Substance Painter. You're good, right? All right. So what we're gonna do for Substance Painter, and again, I sent one to Elly, and so this was the one that we ended up sending to her, because she's gonna go over all that fun stuff. And you can see here I had my final box that was labeled final-ZRemesh, which was fun, and then Questionmark, and then a main tube itself. And so here, it's nothing super fancy, because this was just the box, and I wanted just a little bit of kind of like coloring and texture to it. So again, I just kind of threw in a few things. So let's go over how I approach this. And again, the way you want to, this is where I'm going to say, this is really more of like just showing you what I did, and really just go through and play with some of the stuff and try to create your own version of this. And if you do create your own version of this, especially if you stayed this long, high five to you. Please tag us in it, because we'd love to see it. Yes. So we're going to go up to File, New, and we're going to just focus on a couple options. I don't need UVs, so I don't need auto unwrap. So I'm going to just take out of auto unwrap. I don't need that. My model has UVs. And then I'm going to work in a 2K space, because I can. OpenGL, I think that's where I left it. I think that's fine. And then here I'm going to hit select, and I'm going to open up where I had everything. And I'm going to open up my FBX. Wherever you saved it, go find it. That's the file we're going to be going through. And then we're just going to say, okay. Yeah, discard all that. I didn't do any major changes. And now here is my question mark. And this looks beautiful, right? This is everything we wanted. So now what we're going to do is we're going to, first and foremost, I like to focus on getting the main bake happening. So I'm going to adjust some of this over for the first time, just kind of move it. Okay, so we're actually going to come on up. There's usually a little croissant here, but I think because of screen space, I'm actually going to move this down. This is actually what I do like about Substance Painter is I'm able to kind of move stuff around if I wanted to. So you can see here, this is a big menu. I'm sure I can just readjust the screen space. I just didn't do that this time. But that's kind of cool knowing that you can move stuff around. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm just going to come up here to the croissant. And now this is going to give me a new window. And this is my baking window. And from here, what I'm going to do is I actually want to bake this on itself. I didn't create a high poly and a low poly because I didn't think that was necessary for this project. So here, I'm going to take my output size. I'm going to set that to 2K. And then I'm going to come over and say, use low poly mesh as a high poly mesh. If I click that, it's just going to focus on itself. That's it. It's just going to take itself and then say, project all those details there. And then I can adjust any of the caging I need at the time, but this actually is looking pretty good. I don't see any major error spots or random collisions that are going to be affecting me. So I think this is actually pretty good. And then I'm going to go through and pick the maps that I want. I don't need a ton of these maps. So I don't really want to focus on thickness and position and curvature. Not really a thing for me. I don't need world space. I think really all I'm going to need is, well, maybe I want the curvature, but ambient occlusion, curvature, ID, normal. That's all I think I'm really going to need for this project, but feel free to play with and adjust yourself. I'm going to make a change under ambient occlusion because secondary rays I think is a little low. For my hard surface projects, I kick it up to about 100. That's just what I do. And then from there, I think it just looks better. It's a personal preference. And then from there, now we're just going to go ahead and bake this. So I'm going to come back up to common settings, and then I'm going to go ahead and say bake my textures. Now we're going to do this in real time, so this might take a couple seconds, and you might see some flashing. And of course, we had what I classify as down and dirty UVs. So there might be just a little bit of interesting scale factors, but for this project, it's not super necessary. We're just trying to get in and out as quickly as possible. Okay, great. So it did all the baking, and if I take baking visualization and turn it off, you can see here that I now have a little bit better of what looks like a proper cube, and shadows look good. I don't see any crazy baking errors. So looking at the light, that looks cool. All right, so I think we're pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and say return to paint mode. And now I'm thinking if I go to viewport, I want to see something real fast. Window. I want to reset my UI now that I've baked. And I'm going to hit F2 to get out of. If you have F3 on, you could see the actual maps of each one. If you hit F1, it'll show you both the map and the actual 3D. I'm actually on a laptop again, so rocking that MSI machine. And here I just, I have limited space, so I'm going to isolate it down to just the visualization here. And now here, this is where the magic really starts kicking in on the texturing side, is that I could just start throwing on materials the way I want. So I think I'll throw on a smart material, and it literally was as simple as this. There's a nice gold damage. I plopped that on, and I took a look at what that looked like. And then I think I controlled Z at one point, and I even came down here to like this machinery one, and then said like, oh, that actually looks kind of cool. So then from here, I just modified this material to fit the needs that I actually like. So looked at the dirt. I'm actually going to delete this base layer here. And I actually turned a lot of this stuff off. And then I ended up just kind of like looking at the dirt pass and seeing if it gave me something a little unique, which it did. So I'm going to turn that on, give me a little bit of a grittiness to it. And then there's dust on here as well. And then this is where I actually will come on down and adjust some of the properties. So I would come in here, go tri-plane projection, and then maybe adjust some of the tiling or the scaling, even the hardness. And I'll see if I'm getting something that I absolutely love. And if I don't love it, or if I'm not seeing any changes to it, then I kind of just if I don't see anything that I like, I just end up deleting that layer. And in this case, I really didn't see much of a change, and that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete that one. That one's not doing it for me. And it's really now just about you playing and finding something that you like. And I also went to my basic materials here. And now we just layer stacked. If you're familiar with Photoshop, basically it's kind of the same approach to it. You have blend modes that you can work on with the different types of maps that you have. So I have my metallic maps, roughness, normals, heights, base color. And then here, I'm just working in layers at this point. So, and I believe there was actually, I think there was a dirt material. And if I don't have a material that I'm finding that I like, this is actually where you could pop into the straight from Adobe. You could come in here and say like, oh, okay, do you have like a dirty material or like a grunge material even? You could find some fun materials to play in here. I actually encourage everyone to kind of just more at this point, find something that you think would actually look good and try it yourself. Here, I'm going to say, I think this will actually be fine. I think I'll find like another, let's find something. What was it that I used? Boop, 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 boop. I think I used like I think I downloaded a material. Let me see if I can find it real fast. Let's see if I can find like a spec material. Let's actually see. Let's type in grunge. See if we can find something. Ah, there we go. Grunge metal. That actually looks pretty cool. I'm going to download that. And I'll even probably download this kind of grunge wall-based material. Awesome. Very, very cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to my downloads, and I'm just going to grab this and throw that in there. And it's going to say, hey, what do I want to do with this? Throw this in base material. And I'm going to say import by just my resource, so my project. And I'm going to import this. And then that's going to bring that in. So then every time I load this project, it's going to load that. And then I could slap that right on there. And now, of course, it's giving me this kind of concrete material. So I'm actually going to change the blend mode to maybe something like overlay and just give me a little bit of roughness to that. And we can even do some fun stuff where we can add like, let's add like a black mask. And then let's actually add like a generator. And then I can add some sort of like dirt generator to that. And then that's going to give me just a little bit more. If I zoom in, it's going to give me kind of a nice dirt effect throw over with that texture. And then I can actually come back in and then I can focus on tiling and rotating and getting some different results with this. So, and then of course too, I could turn off the metal, I could turn off the normals, I could turn off the color even, and I could just focus on just the actual effect itself. And so I'm not really too concerned about all these different sliders. I only focus on a couple things at a time. So it's really about just coming in and playing with it and giving it a good go. And I didn't mean to move that there, so I'm going to do that. And let's come up here. All right, awesome. And so I did this pass with everything. I'm going to take a metal material. So there's a smart metal material. We downloaded that one. So let me find it. Grunge metal. I'm going to kick this. Same thing. It's on our smart material. Let's load that in. And then I'm going to set this actually on the question mark itself. Now, this looks kind of cool and nasty out the gates, but it's not quite what I would like. So what I'm going to do is open this up. Move this so you can see it a little bit better. And now here, I'm actually going to turn off the base color a little bit, and then maybe just tone down some of these edges. I always find that it's good to kind of work on just manipulating a little bit of what you're going for. You don't have to go too crazy, and you definitely don't have to sit here and just like, you know, kind of destroy it yourself. Like just modify it a little bit. Like come in, throw something on, make some changes, see if that's something that you like. And then if you do like that, you can actually just come in here and say, copy this layers, take this to my tubes, and I could paste that straight in. Now everything got put from there, from the from the question mark onto the tube itself. And then now I actually want to make these look like they're a little bit more like deep, like they're deeper than they actually are. And we could fake that with some color. So I can actually come on in, add a new paint layer. So I can either add a fill, and then that could fill with a certain color and all my different layers. And in here, I'm just going to say, let's fill this with all white. And then we're actually going to change that to true black. And then now we have them. They look really black, and that's not what we're going for. So we're going to add a black mask, say something like this. And now with this, I now can actually paint. I actually can come in here and I can paint with a paintbrush and start painting this in so that it looks pretty good. And if there's something like here, like for example, let's come in here. Yes, perfect. Okay. Oh, I hit a button. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. What is happening? Hold on, my computer started yelling at me. Give me 1 second. I might have hit a button I didn't mean to. Any questions so far?
Yeah, from Skyzol, they were wondering, is Substance able to use ZBrush's polygroups? Do you know?
You can set that up. So like you can actually set up vertex coloring to use as an ID mask, which is a really great way. You can actually fill your objects with all the different colors. So you can use the polygroup colors and make them vertex coloring. And then you can actually, in the bake process, you can, under ID map, pick vertex color and go that route. It wasn't necessary for this project, but you can utilize that for doing ID maps. But I don't know. That's an Adobe question, because I don't know if I can actually import those in directly. I'd have to double check and see. Okay. Okay, I hit a thing. What did I hit? 1 second. There we go. This ended up hitting the material. Okay, so now, of course, I want to be able to paint all of this so that it looks like it's going in deep, but I just painted the one, and that's not what I wanted. So I actually can turn on symmetry. Click that. Click it for me. There we go. I can turn on symmetry, and then I can do a radial symmetry. Okay, what are we doing here? Let's go base color. Why is it doing that to me? 1 second. It's freaking out, man. Is my screen flashing on you guys?
No.
Okay.
It's not for me. I don't know if it's
Okay.
for anyone on the stream.
Okay. Let me, I think I hit something. So let me just restart this real fast. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just close this down and then restart it. Just so I want to make sure.
It's cool. We had a question in the meantime that I can answer from Trent's, wondering, do these materials translate over into Cinema 4D? Yes, they do. So there's a couple of different ways. So the first way, which is what we did during like this session, was you can actually export these as texture maps, and then you can use those texture maps and you can rebuild them in any 3D software, any render engine. We chose Cinema 4D and Redshift. And so you can rebuild those and you can use them. What you can also do is, if you're working in standard Cinema 4D, so I'm talking, if we're not talking about a render engine like Redshift or Octane, you can actually save them as an SBSAR, which is a substance asset. Then inside of Cinema 4D, there is the, oh God, I'm going to forget the name, the Substance Asset Manager, I think. Something like that, in the plugin section, and you can actually bring those in as pre-made materials from Substance straight inside of the standard renderer.
Awesome. That's so cool. Okay. I know I've taken up a lot of time, and I want to get to some Redshift stuff. So I loaded in the base project that Elly's going to be working on to save some time.
In fairness, I don't know if we're going to, because I know we're getting up to the 2-hour mark, but I was thinking I could link to the project that I did in week 2 or 3, which is the same sort of idea, only because I know everyone, I'm sure, has things to do today.
Yeah, I'm sure. Absolutely. But we definitely need to show it. So we'll show the project at the end. What I wanted to show real quick was once, and that's pretty much the process I did with Substance Painter. I took in a bunch of stuff. I actually just brought in materials, and I really just went for what I thought looked good. Definitely imploring you to play around. Download some smart materials, download some base materials, drag them on there. And again, if you're familiar with Photoshop, just get in here and just start playing around and seeing what it looks like. But then one of the things I wanted to showcase was that when you have a paint layer, so if I grab just a brand new layer, and I want this to look like it's in depth a little bit, so I just grabbed a new paint layer, and then I'm actually going to come down here at the bottom and just do the color, okay? And then I'm going to change the color to true black. The only few times I'd actually say we're going to do this in true black. And then I'm actually going to, just real fast, let's come in here. And let's make sure that that is turned on correctly. Okay. Okay. Let's put that up there. There we go. So now I have this, right? And so what I want to do is actually give this a black mask. And then I can come up here and I can actually find radial symmetry on what I want. And with this, I'm just doing this on the y-axis. So I'm mirroring on the y-axis. I actually am painting on all the sides, very similar to what ArrayMesh did, right? So I can just come in here, and the reason why I recommended true black was because I want this to look like it's infinitely deep, that there's actually depth to this. And this is a little shortcut I do when I'm trying to just come in and actually showcase that something is not, you know, it's deeper than it actually appears. I'll do this in mouth of characters, and then I'll soften it out. When I need to gradient that out and actually have a shadow cast in there, that's the only time you want to stay away from true black. So, but if you want this infinite depth look without working too hard, or making that actual geo, you can do this, paint true black. And then when I zoom out, you can see here, it looks a lot deeper than it is. And if you take the time and actually do this with a little bit of gradient fall off, give it some shadowing, it can look really, really nice. And then that's just using array. And then here, I just actually did a little bit of some adjustments, some settings here. I turned on some After Effects, some like post effects like color correction and glare. I actually have a really high glare for this because I wanted it to be shiny and give me that kind of look for it. So, and I just came in through here and just turned that stuff on, which looked good. If I turn on the shadow aspect, you can see here, this is actually what it looks like if we were to kind of render it. And this is actually looking really, really nice. And then I just basically from here, once I'm satisfied with all of this, then I just came up to export my textures. And I just chose, and Elly can tell me if I did this right or not, I just chose Redshift material. And then I hit, from this point, I just went through and then exported out all of my list here. So I came through and I did export. And then I sent all of that over to Elly. And Elly then showed me a render. So I'm assuming that that worked.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, so pretty much, I think a lot of the presets work because a lot of render engines or 3D software has the same kind of maps. So as long as when you check your export, you've got the things that you need. Yeah, Redshift is a great preset, but I'm sure a lot of them have similar things, like the PBR preset as well has similar maps. So yeah, as long as it's got the ones you need, or you can just drag and drop them yourself.
Cool. And that's it for me. I didn't mean to swallow up the time, but we did do some troubleshooting.
You were going in on that cube, so it's and the thing is, you didn't get to do your session. So this is what this is for anyone who doesn't know. We're going to out this now. Ian wasn't able to do his session on the 4th week of the demystifying, so it's right that you take all of this time to cover all of that stuff that you didn't get to.
Oh, well, thanks for letting me do it then.
It was all good.
But yeah, so this was it. Elly, do you want to share what your render looks like?
I can share. I can show the project and show the render, which took this question box and the texture, and I just kind of went a little bit crazy with layering more textures, which is what I do.
Yeah.
So feel free to
bring my screen down. Hold on one second. Inception for a bit.
Yeah, someone might need to pull mine up just so I don't do the Inception thing. So let me know.
While you're loading that up, somebody said, rather than a texture map, can you bake in height details of materials used back in ZBrush? Yes, you can. Absolutely. What you could do is you can actually just bring in your height or displacement map into ZBrush, throw that into the displacement map section, and then turn it on, and then increase the intensity, and then you can bake the details back.
Cool. So is my screen on screen?
Yes, it is. And
cool.
That looks freaking awesome. And this is going to just so everyone knows, this is going to be my phone wallpaper. That's how excited I am about this.
Yeah, no, so I thought it'd be fun to throw this together. And it's actually a really simple scene, like just to kind of break that down first of all. We've of course got the hero question box here, which we can see is that FBX that I brought in. And then the rest of the scene is, I mean, it looks like a lot, but I promise it's not. It's these little cables here that I made using the kitbash cables that you can find in here. So I basically just like kitbashed a load of stuff together. So if you search like kitbash, we have a bunch of assets and capsules that you can take advantage of. Where we got these like pipes and springs and cool stuff like that. And so I drew a spline. This is honestly as technical as it gets. I drew a few splines, then I used a spline wrap. If I just sort of come down here, I used a spline wrap on them to make it look like some tubing. Then some extra little bits, again, just from the asset browser. So the steel barricade, which is this little gate here, and then the manhole cover. And I just always take the textures off because I like to retexture things myself to make sure it goes with the aesthetic that I'm going for in the scene. And then it is just a floor, a landscape that's been displaced with some grass over the top. And I use the Redshift matrix. So you can see that we only had these little matrices, which is great because it's not going to be piling loads of geometry and loads of polygons inside of my viewport. It keeps things nice and fast and snappy, but you can see it's rendering grass elements on the left-hand side in my actual render view. So that is literally the scene. And then I just took advantage of throwing in some different lighting. So if I maybe pull this over, like let's just... Also, if you want to link to, I don't know if I've dropped it in there, link to my week's demystifying session, which, oh God, was it week 3? Where I cover this kind of stuff, just with a slightly different scene. We went through the cheeseburger. So I went through lighting that and then putting those substance textures together. But yeah, just to break this down a little bit more. This is what it looks like without our lighting. As we can see, it is not very nice. And I always tend to start with a bit of ambient lighting. So throw in a dome light and then drop in a HDR, which is actually this sky. And it's from the Grayscale Gorilla Sky pack. And then reduce the intensity a little bit and always reduce the saturation just to take out some of that color. And then I just threw in some area lights. So the thing is, like, dome lighting works and ambient lighting works really well to cast overall lighting over your scene. As we can see, it makes a massive difference on its own. But when we're working with detailed materials, sort of like this, and especially like grunge and imperfections, area lights is the stuff that's going to bring out that detail. And so I just threw in a few different area lights. So a main one on the left-hand side, which actually reduced the spread. So we have more of a direct light, really kind of highlighting that left-hand side and being the main focus. And then just a few extra ones, casting some rim lighting and some extra lighting inside of here. And this one is actually, I think it's this one here. Yeah, this one is a really, really big area light with a really low intensity. So we can see it's 900 by 900 centimeters. And I've got it pointing down. So you might be able to see my viewport if I just sort of come out of here. So if I just sort of like come out. Oh.
This is such a cool breakdown. I love it.
It's just like a 5-minute breakdown of everything. So if we can sort of see, yeah, so you can see it's this like really, really big area light on the top. And I just threw a gobo on it and it gives the impression of the sun coming through the clouds. And so layering up your light, so you don't necessarily have to have like loads of lights in your scene. As long as they're doing different things, you can really bring out some different details. So here we've got the dome light for our ambient lighting. We've got the rim light. We've got that's kind of like a spotlight on the left-hand side. And then that top light is just creating this extra shadow here. So it may not look like much, but if I switch it off, and if we let it just kick in, so that's what it looks like normally. And then we have this, and it just adds extra shadow and extra detail. And gobos are a really great way of doing this. But you can also throw it on a texture with Maxon noise. And then just to talk through just this texture here, let me just sort of switch that off. We don't need to have that render going. So if I just click this group, so this might look like a lot, but what it is the first lot of things, so the first lot of nodes, these are all controlling that initial base color. And they're actually using those texture maps that Ian just created. So we have all our question mark ones. So we have the question mark base color. We then have the question mark roughness. I didn't use the metalness because it was just it was like a plain gray, plain mid gray. So I was able to control the metalness myself. And then we have all the others. And then what I did was I then took the same type of thing. So I took these concrete texture maps. So again, similar kind of thing. And then I just duplicated everything together. So it now looks like it's got the dirty metal, but it's also now got panels. And so it looks like metal panels, even though this was originally a concrete texture. Like I like to think outside the box sometimes. I like to break the rules when it comes to working with textures quite a lot. And I just combined these elements together inside of a color layer, which is effectively the Photoshop of Redshift. We can add colors, we can add masks, and we can have blending modes, nice and simple. And so we can mix those two things together. And then that's what I did. I mixed all those different textures together to create one final material. So we can see here, if I just come out of there, we can see this is the final material. And so we have that group controlling our base color, our roughness, and it should also be controlling our bump. And then I like to layer up my materials and my textures because just like inside of Substance, the more layers you have, the more imperfections, the more kind of a variation, just the better things are going to look, or closer to maybe like an aesthetic that you're after. Like I wanted this dystopian style, which is based off of one of my favorite artists, a guy called Vertices from the Czech Republic. He does a lot of these like dystopian styles. He does rusty cartoons. He's really popular. So I was kind of like leaning on that style of, creating this effect and then just layering up different textures. So we had this first material and then we have like a secondary material, again, all just blending together, just using, a bunch of different textures. I like to just throw everything together. That's pretty much my style. And then, blending everything together in displacement as well.
That's literally my style in Substance Painter. Just throw everything together.
Literally throw it together.
Yeah. I think that's the beauty part about projects like this, is that you get to just really lean in on that artistic creativity. And that was the whole point of this too. It's like, as you're following along and stuff like that, or you end up creating something very similar to this and you let us know, just really lead with that creativity. I think that always drives a good image. And this looks fantastic, Elly. Seriously, looks great.
Thanks.
It's my wallpaper.
To be fair, I'm quite happy with it. Normally I don't really like anything I make, but I was quite satisfied with this. But I could tweak forever, like we all can, especially when it comes to materials. Like once I've got my lighting pretty set, I could just continue to play. I'm glad like we've done the stream now, because now I'm done. Whereas I'll just sit and be like continuously tweak.
It'd be cool actually, because like Silent Moon was like, I render it with like fog and rainy weather and such, right? Like, what if you did like seasons? Like, you did this box in like different seasons. Then they can have like
a great idea.
We can have different season package. So you can have a rainy one, then you can have a sunny one, and that could be.
That's
cool.
a really cool idea. Oh no! See, now I'm not done.
Well, yeah. You said
Now I'm going to be doing this.
I instigate. I'm like, actually.
Hey Elly, why don't you add a lens flare?
Yeah.
This is what Ian does, by the way.
Just like, Elly, try that. No, this looks great. Well, first off, thanks to you for everyone for hanging out with us for 2 hours as we go through this stuff, and especially you, Noseman, just sitting there in the shadows as the shadow.
Also, can I ask, is my screen down? Can I come back without doing an Inception thing so I can see everyone?
There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
What I was saying is that, I enjoy sitting here and watch you people suffering to make beautiful things, while I just focus on solving a problem, and then I feel like $1 million. I mean, it must be a terrible existence to want to make things beautiful and nice. I don't get that. I don't understand that. So I feel I'm blessed with a total lack of talent. Thank you very much for nature. Well, not
We're
silly.
here to encourage.
The burden of wanting to make beautiful things. Yeah.
That's
Great.
it. Yeah.
We're all envious of all of the information that you know, Thanasis. You know more than pretty much everyone. So I'm envious of that.
I'm just extremely lucky. I just put together random strings of words and the correct answer comes on the other side. I'm sort of a very lucky AI machine. So yeah.
Yeah. That's perfect. Okay, cool. So we're going to wrap it up for the day. Does anybody
Yes.
have the links we can throw in there so people can get their free t-shirt? Because
I think Kyle can. Also, shout out to Kyle. He is the main man in the background who makes sure all of these go well because, as we know, we are not trusted to do it ourselves. Rightly so.
Very good reason. Yeah.
So thank you, Kyle.
Yep, absolutely. And everybody go grab that free t-shirt. Again, you only have to pay for shipping. And then make sure to also follow some of those links for Cineversity as well, where you can learn all the stuff for free,
All the
essentially.
stuff.
Yeah, all the stuff and things. Just get
All the
in there,
stuff.
learn it. And then as well as I'm going to do a little bit of a shout out too. I'll look up the website. But if you type in ZBrushSummit.com, there is a summit that is happening for ZBrush. It's live in person, and it's also going to be online as well. So if you can't make it to Los Angeles, but I'm going to throw that in the chat as well because you can register now. More information to come for sure. So you're going to want to do that. Let me just make sure I can copy that, move that over, paste it, boom. So definitely check that out. Well as we also do offer student licensing through Maxon. So I think it's fair to say it's pretty much cheaper than any meal. If you do one meal of takeout, it's cheaper than that, regardless of where you eat. So go check out that as well, which is also on maxon.net. So please go check that out and get that student teacher license. And that's it. I think that's it.
That's it.
Well then, bye everyone. And we'll see you next time. We
Thanks
have more stuff coming. So we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.